it up and cast it aside. Having repeated this several times, he plunged his head in and brought it forth saturated with dirty water, and bedaubed with lumps of mud, through which his fierce eyes gazed, with a ludicrous expression of astonishment, straight in the direction of the hunters, as if he meant to say, "I've done it that time, and no mistake." The other buffaloes seemed to think so too, for they came up and looked on, with an expression that seemed to say, "Well done, old fellow, try that again." The old fellow did try it again, and again, and again, plunging and ramming and tearing up the earth, until he formed an excavation large enough to contain his huge body. In this bath he laid himself comfortably down and began to roll and wallow about until he mixed up a trough full of thin soft mud, which completely covered him. When he came out of the hole there was scarcely an atom of his former self visible. The coat of mud thus put on by bulls is usually permitted by them to dry, and is not finally got rid of until long after, when oft repeated rollings on the grass and washings by rain at length clear it away. When the old bull vacated this delectable bath, another bull, scarcely, if at all, less ferocious looking, stepped forward to take his turn, but he was interrupted by a volley from the hunters, which scattered the animals right and left, and sent the mighty herds in the distance flying over the prairie in wild terror. The very turmoil of their own mad flight added to their panic, and the continuous thunder of their hoofs was heard until the last of them disappeared on the horizon. The family party which had been fired at, however, did not escape so well. Joe's rifle wounded a fat young cow, and Dick Varley brought it down. Henry had done his best, but as the animals were too far distant for his limited vision, he missed the cow he fired at, and hit the young bull whose bath had been interrupted. The others scattered and fled. "Well done, Dick!" exclaimed Joe, as they all ran up to the cow that had fallen. "Your first shot at the buffalo was a good 'un. Come now, and I'll show you how to cut it up and carry off the tidbits." "Oh, mon dear bull!" exclaimed Henry, gazing after the animal which he had wounded, and which was now limping slowly away. "You is not worth going after. Well, adieu." "He'll be tough enough, I warrant," said Joe, "and we've more meat here nor we can lift." "But wouldn't it be just as well to put the poor old brute out of pain?" suggested Dick. "Oh, he'll die soon enough," replied Joe, tucking up his sleeves and drawing his long hunting knife. Dick, however, was not satisfied with this way of looking at it. Saying that he would be back in just a few minutes, he reloaded his rifle, and calling Crusoe to his side, walked quickly after the wounded bull, which was now hid from view in a hollow of the plain. In a few minutes he came in sight of it, and ran forward with his rifle in readiness. "Down, Crusoe," he whispered. "Wait for me here." Crusoe crouched in the grass instantly, and Dick advanced. As he came on, the bull observed him, and turned round bellowing with rage and pain to receive him. The aspect of the brute on a near view was so terrible that Dick involuntarily stopped too, and gazed with a mingled feeling of wonder and awe, while it bristled with passion, and blood-streaked foam dropped from its open jaws, and its eyes glared furiously. Seeing that Dick did not advance, the bull charged him with a terrific roar, but the youth had firm nerves, and although the rush of such a savage creature at full speed was calculated to try the courage of any man, especially one who had never seen a buffalo bull before, Dick did not lose presence of mind. He remembered the many stories he had listened to of this very thing that was now happening, so, crushing down his excitement as well as he could, he cocked his rifle and awaited the charge. He knew that it was of no use to fire at the head of the advancing foe, as the thickness of the skull, together with the matted hair on the forehead, rendered it impervious to a bullet. When the bull was within a yard of him, he leaped lightly to one side, and it passed. Just as it did so, Dick aimed at his heart and fired. But his knowledge of the creature's anatomy was not yet correct. The ball entered the shoulder too high, and the bull, checking himself as well as he could in his headlong rush, turned round and made at Dick again. The failure coupled with the excitement proved too much for Dick. He could not resist discharging his second barrel at the brute's head as it came on. He might as well have fired at a brick wall. It shook its shaggy front, and with a hideous bellow thundered forward. Again Dick sprang to one side, but in doing so a tuft of grass or a stone caught his foot, and he fell heavily to the ground. Up to this point Crusoe's admirable training had nailed him to the spot where he had been left, although the twitching of every fibre in his body and a low continuous whine showed how gladly he would have hailed permission to join in the combat. But the instant he saw his master down, and the buffalo turning to charge again, he sprang forward with a roar that would have done credit to his bovine enemy, and seized him by the nose. So vigorous was the rush that he well nigh pulled the bull down on its side. One toss of its head, however, sent Crusoe high in the air, but it accomplished this feat at the expense of its nose, which was torn and lacerated by the dog's teeth. Scarcely had Crusoe touched the ground when he did with a sounding thump. Then he sprang up and flew at his adversary again. This time, however, he adopted the plan of barking furiously and biting by rapid yet terrible snaps as he found opportunity, thus keeping the bull entirely engrossed and affording Dick an opportunity of reloading his rifle, which he was not slow to do. Dick then stepped close up, and while the two combatants were roaring in each other's face, he shot the buffalo through the heart. It fell to the earth with a deep groan. Crusoe's rage instantly vanished on beholding this, and he seemed to be filled with a tumultuous joy at his master's escape, for he gambolled round him and whined and fawned upon him in a manner that could not be misunderstood. "Good dog! Thank ye, my pup," said Dick, patting Crusoe's head as he stopped to brush the dust from his leggings. "I don't know what would have become of me but for your help, Crusoe." Crusoe turned his head a little to one side, wagged his tail, and looked at Dick with an expression that said quite plainly, "I'd die for you, I would, not once or twice, but 10 times, 50 times if need be, and that not merely to save your life, but even to please you." There is no doubt whatever that Crusoe felt something of this sort. The love of a Newfoundland dog to its master is beyond calculation or expression. He who once gains such love carries the dog's life in his hand. But let him who reads note well and remember that there is only one coin that can purchase such love, and that is kindness. The coin, too, must be genuine. Kindness merely expressed will not do. It must be felt. "Hallo, boy! You've been in the wars!" exclaimed Joe, raising himself from his task as Dick and Crusoe returned. "You look more like it than I do," retorted Dick, laughing. This was true, for cutting up a buffalo carcass with no other instrument than a large knife is no easy matter. Yet Western hunters and Indians can do it without cleaver or saw, in a way that would surprise a civilized butcher not a little. Joe was covered with blood up to the elbows. His hair, happening to have a knack of getting into his eyes, had been so often brushed off with bloody hands that his whole visage was speckled with gore, and his dress was by no means immaculate. While Dick related his adventure or misadventure with the bull, Joe and Henry completed the cutting out of the most delicate portions of the buffalo, namely the hump on its shoulder, which is a choice piece, much finer than the best beef, and the tongue, and a few other parts. The tongues of buffaloes are superior to those of domestic cattle. When all was ready, the meat was slung across the back of the pack horse, and the party, remounting their horses, continued their journey, having first cleansed themselves as well as they could in the rather dirty waters of an old wallow. "See," said Henry, turning to Dick and pointing to a circular spot of green as they rode along, "that is one old dry waller." "Ay," remarked Joe, "after the waller dries, it becomes a ring of greener grass than the rest of the plain, as ye see. 'Tis said the first hunters used to wonder greatly at these mysterious circles, and they invented all sorts of stories to account for 'em. Some said they was fairy rings, but at last they comes to know they was nothin' more nor less than places where buffaloes was used to waller in. It's often seemed to me that if we knowed the raison